repay every debt as if God wrote the bond. That's often attributed to Emerson, I think. And it really speaks to how serious debts are. And today, well, we're diving into a situation where those debts are coming due on a, frankly, massive scale. It's a really pivotal moment in global finance. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yes, we're looking at a huge shift. China's role, it's changing.
Yeah.
From being this enormous provider of capital to now increasingly becoming a major debt collector.
That's the core of it. And our guide for this deep dive today, it's an article from The Hindu. I'm sure many of you know it, especially if you're keeping tabs on current affairs for exams like UPSC or just generally staying informed.
Exactly. Our mission here is to unpack the key findings from this report they discuss. It's a Lowy Institute report. We want to understand what's driving this, why now, and why it matters so much. Grasping these kinds of global shifts is, well, it's essential. Whether you're prepping for UPSC mains, prelims, or just want to be an informed citizen, this context is crucial.
Okay, let's dig in. The central finding from Lowy. It's pretty stark. Starting this year, 2025, China is expected to pivot to become the leading debt collector for around 75 developing countries.
And the scale.
Yeah.
The sheer amount of money involved. It's quite something. The report suggests these countries need to pay back a record sum to China just this year, about $22 billion.
Wow. $22 billion in 1 year just to China from developing nations. That number really makes you stop and think. So why the crunch now? What's the specific trigger?
Well, it ties back directly to China's big infrastructure push, the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. The main surge in lending for BRI, that happened mostly in the mid-2010s, I think 2012 to about 2018. A lot of those loans, you see, they came with grace periods, time before repayments had to start.
Oh, okay.
And those grace periods, they're now running out right around now, early 2020s, hitting this year, 2025, hard. That's what creates this crunch period the report talks about.
So it's kind of the natural life cycle of those loans playing out, the grace period's over, time to pay. The report also mentioned China facing some internal pressures about all this debt, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Beijing's in a bit of a tough spot, a real dilemma. On one hand, there's growing diplomatic hate, international pressure from the borrowing countries themselves, asking for debt relief, restructuring, because many are genuinely struggling.
Right.
But on the other hand, you've got strong pressure inside China from the banks, the state institutions that actually issued these loans. They want their money back.
That sounds like a very difficult balancing act. It's more than just economics, and it's foreign policy goals clashing with domestic financial reality.
Precisely.
And this whole shift, from being the big lender to being the big collector, how does that play out for China's reputation globally?
Well, it complicates things, doesn't it? China spent years building this image as a partner in development, funding infrastructure. Moving towards more aggressive debt collection, even if necessary, could strain those relationships. It could affect its soft power, its standing in these countries.
Makes sense. Now, China didn't just ignore this Lowy report, did they? What was their official reaction?
No, they responded. The Chinese Foreign Ministry basically pushed back. Their spokesperson framed the report's conclusions more or less as rumors spread by just a few countries. Their official line is that their investments, their financing cooperation, it all follows international norms, market rules, and importantly, the idea of debt sustainability.
Okay.
And they also made a point of saying, look, it's not just us multilateral institutions. Think World Bank, IMF, they're huge creditors too. They argued that a big chunk of the repayment burden for developing countries actually comes from those institutions, not solely, or maybe not even primarily, from China.
Right, so they're kind of deflecting a bit, pointing out that other major lenders exist and contribute to the overall debt picture. Before we go deeper, maybe just a quick refresher on the Belt and Road Initiative itself, for context.
Good idea. So the BRI, it's really President Xi Jinping's signature project on the world stage, launched back in 2013. The grand idea was this huge network, trade routes, infrastructure roads, ports, railways connecting Asia with Europe, Africa, even further. And China put billions, huge sums into loans for these projects across dozens of countries. It was about boosting trade, connectivity, and, yes, China's global influence.
A massive undertaking. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing. The BRI has faced its share of criticism over the years.
Definitely. One of the most persistent criticisms is this idea of debt traps. The argument goes that some loans were maybe structured in ways that made repayment really difficult, potentially leading to countries having to give up control of strategic assets if they couldn't pay.
And the classic example always brought up is
Sri Lanka. The Hambantota port, that's the one everyone points to. Sri Lanka struggled immensely with the debt for that port, and eventually it was leased to a Chinese state company for 99 years. Kind of a debt for equity swap, essentially.
Right, that Hambantota example really sticks in people's minds as the potential downside risk. But it wasn't just about the loan terms making things hard, was it? Other big factors have made repayment tougher for these countries.
Absolutely. The source material flags the huge impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
That just hammered the economies of many developing nations.
Yeah.
It crushed their ability to earn foreign currency, which
Yeah.
you need to pay back external debts. And then on top of that, sometimes the projects themselves. Maybe they didn't turn out to be as economically viable as hoped. They didn't generate the revenue needed to make repayment easy.
So a combination of factors hitting at once. The report also had some interesting numbers comparing China's debt load to traditional lenders, didn't it?
Yes, and this really highlights the shift we're talking about. The Lowy report found that in 54 countries, that's out of 120, they had data for the amount owed to China just this year, the debt service payments. It actually exceeds the combined amount owed to the Paris Club members.
Wait, say that again? More than the entire Paris Club combined in 54 countries.
That's what the report says. And the Paris Club, remember, that's the group of major Western government lenders. Think US, Japan, Germany, France.
Wow. Okay, so China isn't just one of the big lenders anymore. In a significant number of developing countries, the payments due to China this year alone outweigh what's owed to that whole group of traditional Western creditors.
Exactly. That fundamentally changes the conversation around sovereign debt. Who holds the leverage? Who needs to be at the table for restructuring talks? It's a major power shift.
It really is. And the report also singled out China's dominance in specific regions, especially right next door.
That's right. It pointed out that China is now the largest bilateral lender, government-to-government lender, in 7 out of its 9 neighbors that share a land border. We're talking about places like Laos, Pakistan, Mongolia, Myanmar, the Central Asian states like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan.
And what's interesting there was that these neighbors kept getting big loans even after China started to generally pull back on its global lending post-2018.
Yes, that's a key nuance. Even as the overall BRI lending trend started downwards after 2018, these neighboring countries seem to remain a priority. It suggests, maybe ongoing strategic importance for China in its immediate vicinity, security, trade links, regional stability, whatever the reason. The lending focus persisted there longer.
Let's maybe focus on Pakistan for a moment because the source uses it as a really key example.
Yes, Pakistan is a very important case study here. A World Bank report, which the source mentions, found that China became Pakistan's single largest creditor last year. We're talking about almost $29 billion in loans held by China. That gave China something like a 22% share of Pakistan's total external debt.
Yeah.
That's more than the World Bank itself at 18% and the Asian Development Bank at 15%.
So China isn't just a player in Pakistan's debt situation, it's the dominant one. And Pakistan itself is facing serious debt challenges right now.
That's correct. Pakistan has huge amounts of external debt coming due this year that need to be repaid or more likely rolled over. Estimates vary, but it's somewhere in the range of $22 billion up to potentially over $30 billion needing attention in 2025.
A massive amount.
And China's already stepping in. Just this past March, Beijing agreed to roll over a $2 billion loan for Pakistan. That loan was part of the huge China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, which itself is a flagship BRI project worth around $60 billion. So this rollover, and others that have happened recently, it just underscores Pakistan's ongoing financial vulnerability and China's absolutely central, though complex, role as its main creditor.
And all this is happening while China itself is dealing with its own economic slowdown back home, right?
That's a really important piece of context the source brings up. China's domestic economy is facing headwinds. This slowdown likely fuels that internal pressure we talked about earlier, the pressure from Chinese financial institutions wanting to claw back some of these overseas loans.
Huh.
It also seems to be shifting their strategy for future BRI investments, moving away from those giant mega projects of the early years towards what China is now calling small but beautiful projects, perhaps smaller scale, maybe less risky financially.
Interesting. And just to close the loop, the BRI, the initiative that underpins all these maturing debts, that was first proposed way back in 2013.
Exactly. A decade-plus initiative, and now we're really seeing the financial consequences come home to roost.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. The main takeaway from our deep dive, looking at this Lowy Institute report through the Hindu's coverage, it seems unavoidable. This shift, China moving from primarily lender to leading debt collector for dozens of nations, it's a major global event, economically and diplomatically. And it's happening now because those big loans from the BRI's peak years are simply coming mature.
Absolutely. And understanding this dynamic is, well, it's vital for anyone trying to make sense of the world today. If you're studying for competitive exams, UPSC, for instance, where current affairs are key, this is textbook material on changing global power dynamics. Or if you're in international business or just want to be informed about the forces shaping geopolitics and the global economy, this shift has huge implications.
It really does. And it leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? What does this fundamental change mean for the future? Not just for the immediate financial health of the countries trying to pay up, but for the leverage and influence of a creditor superpower like China. How might this reshape the entire relationship between borrowing nations and the big global financial powers?
Yeah, that's the big question. It touches on everything: geopolitics, economic stability, international relations for years to come. It's definitely a story that's far from over. We'll be watching how it unfolds.
We certainly hope this deep dive has shed some light on this really complex and important topic for you. If you found it useful, we'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. And please subscribe to the deep dive so you don't miss our future explorations. We genuinely want to hear your perspectives too. Do you have thoughts on this? Questions? Leave us a comment below. Your feedback really helps us. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for listening.